What if the life you're so proud of is actually a slow, silent suicide of the soul? You think you're playing it safe, but you're actually burying your greatest power alive. Stay with me, because what I'm about to reveal will change how you see your fear forever. Have you ever considered the possibility that the life you are currently living is actually a well-crafted lie? Not a lie told to others, but a much more dangerous one told to yourself. We all carry this invisible anchor, a heavy, silent weight that we've mistaken for a foundation. We call it being realistic. We call it being responsible. But if we are being brutally honest, in those quiet moments at 3 a.m., when the world is still, we know exactly what it really is. It is a slow, methodical suicide of the soul. We are terrified that if we actually stepped into our own power, we would lose the safety of our smallness. And so we choose to stay in a cage because the bars feel familiar. This is water concept mindset. And today, we are going to look at the terrifying cost of staying hidden and why the very thing you are running from is the only thing that can save you. Before we dive into the depths of this journey, if you find value in these reflections, please subscribe to the channel. Your support is the fuel that allows us to continue exploring these difficult truths together. Everyone knows fear, but few of us realize how it actually functions. It doesn't usually arrive as a monster. It arrives as a whisper. It's that subtle tightening in your chest when you think about finally launching that project, or that cold sweat when you imagine speaking a truth that might disrupt your comfortable social circle. We've been conditioned to think that fear is a signal to stop, a warning that danger is ahead. But I've spent a long time analyzing this, and I've come to a different conclusion. What if fear is actually a signpost? What if that intense vibration in your nervous system isn't a no, but a yes so loud it scares you? We choose the miserable known over the beautiful unknown every single day because our brains are hardwired to prioritize survival over fulfillment. But surviving is not the same as being alive. I've lived with my own versions of safe, plain bowls for years, terrified to show the world the art I was actually capable of. I was hiding, just like you might be hiding right now. But there is a story about a potter named Anna that changed everything for me. A story that reveals the devastating price of a life lived in the shadows. To truly understand how this hidden tragedy unfolds, we have to look closer at the life of Anna, a woman whose existence had become a masterpiece of wasted potential. For 20 years, her world was defined by the hypnotic, mechanical hum of the potter's wheel. In the eyes of her village, Anna was the embodiment of stability. She made simple, sturdy bowls, the kind of objects that are necessary but entirely forgettable. They served a purpose, they paid the bills, and they kept her life predictable. But there is a specific kind of soul-crushing exhaustion that comes from doing work that is fine when you know, deep in your marrow, that you were built for something extraordinary. This is what I call the trap of hollow success. It is the life that looks functional on the outside but feels like an empty shell on the inside. Anna's real life, however, didn't begin until the rest of the world went dark. When the lanterns were extinguished and the village fell silent, she would retreat into the back of her workshop. There, away from the prying eyes of neighbors and the weight of expectations, her hands finally found their true rhythm. She didn't make bowls at midnight. She shaped clay birds that looked as though they were caught in the split second before flight. She sculpted faces with expressions of such raw longing and ancient wisdom that they seemed ready to exhale. These pieces were more than art. They were her secret heart made tangible. Yet, the most haunting part of this ritual was what happened every morning before dawn. Anna would take those breathtaking creations, the very best of herself, and deliberately crush them back into formless, gray lumps of clay. She was caught in the grip of what we call perfectionism, but let's call it what it really is: a defense mechanism. She convinced herself that by destroying her work, she was protecting it. She was so terrified of a world that might not understand her, or worse, might laugh at her, that she chose to be her own executioner. Every time she smashed a clay bird, she was telling herself that her dreams were foolish and that staying small was her only shield. We often think of self-sabotage as a loud, dramatic failure. But for Anna, and perhaps for many of us, it was a quiet, daily ritual. She was trading her aliveness for a false sense of security, proving that the most dangerous place to live isn't on the edge of a cliff, but in a routine that no longer requires your soul. This cycle of creation and destruction might have continued until Anna was nothing more than a ghost in her own shop, had it not been for the arrival of a man who saw through the mask of her competence. He was an old merchant, a traveler whose eyes seemed heavy with the dust of 1,000 roads, and he spent hours simply sitting in the corner of her workshop, watching her repeat the same safe motions. He bought a plain bowl, but he didn't leave. Instead, he lingered in that uncomfortable silence that usually precedes a life-altering truth. When he finally spoke, he didn't comment on her skill or her productivity. He looked at her hands and told her they were sad. It's a chilling thought, isn't it? The idea that our bodies might be betraying the secrets we try so hard to hide that our very hands can carry the weight of the truths we refuse to speak. The merchant's observation pierced Anna's defenses because it bypassed her intellect and went straight to her grief. He told her that her bowls were fine, but they were the same as 10,000 other bowls made by someone who was hiding. When Anna finally broke and showed him her secret gallery of impossible things, the merchant didn't offer empty praise. He offered a mirror. He asked her why she destroyed them, and when she admitted her fear of failure and the laughter of others, he gave her a definition of failure that I have never been able to forget. He told her that by staying small, she was already failing. He called it failing slowly. Think about that for a second. We spend our lives avoiding the big failure, the public rejection, the business that goes under, the relationship that ends, while completely ignoring the fact that we are failing a little bit every single day by killing the work that wants to be born through us. We think the status quo is a neutral ground, but there is no such thing as standing still. If you are not moving toward what is true, you are actively retreating into what is false. The merchant challenged the very foundation of her safety, arguing that the quiet death of a dream is a far more catastrophic loss than the loud noise of a mistake. He forced her to realize that she was already living her worst-case scenario. She was a person who had given up before the world even had a chance to say no. The merchant's words stripped away Anna's last excuses, leaving her with a choice that felt less like an opportunity and more like a cliff edge. He didn't ask her to change her entire life overnight. He simply told her to put one single piece, just one bird, with its clay wings spread wide in the shop window the next morning. It sounds like such a small thing, but for someone who has spent 2 decades building a fortress of anonymity, exposure feels like a death sentence. That next morning, Anna found herself standing in the center of her workshop, her fingers trembling as they brushed against the delicate curves of her real work. This is the moment we all face, the gap between knowing what we must do and actually having the stomach to do it. She felt physically ill, a visceral reaction to the threat of being seen. We often romanticize courage as a heroic, soaring feeling, but in reality, it feels like nausea and a racing heart. It is the terrifying sensation of your nervous system screaming danger while your soul whispers forward. Anna placed the bird in the window and retreated into the shadows, waiting for the world to collapse. But something strange happened, or rather, nothing happened. People walked by. Some glanced, some didn't, and the sky remained exactly where it was. This is the first great lesson of the trembling step. The world is far less concerned with our shameful vulnerability than we are. However, on the 3rd day, the silence broke. A woman stopped, drawn in by the raw emotion frozen in the clay bird, and she bought it not because it was a useful vessel, but because it spoke to her own desire for freedom. In that exchange, Anna experienced a shift that no amount of safe bowl-making could ever provide. She realized that by protecting herself, she had actually been withholding a gift from the people who needed it most. This is the mechanics of growth. You don't wait for the fear to vanish before you act. You take the fear with you. You do the work while your hands are shaking, because that shaking isn't a sign of weakness. It's the sound of your old self cracking open to let something new be born. Anna began to understand that the real danger wasn't in being judged, but in the tragic possibility of never being known at all. The moment Anna stopped treating her fear as a barrier and started seeing it as a companion, the landscape of her entire existence began to shift. 5 years later, her workshop was no longer just a place where objects were made. It had become a sanctuary for the spirit, a destination for those who sought something more than just utility. But if you were to stand in that room, you wouldn't notice the awards or the increased wealth first. You would notice her face. The hollow, haunted look that had shadowed her for 20 years was gone, replaced by a radiant aliveness that only comes when a person finally stops apologizing for their own existence. She had discovered the ultimate paradox of growth. The very thing we are most terrified of exposing is usually the exact key required to unlock our freedom. This is the fundamental truth we so easily forget in the noise of our daily routines. We think fear is a stop sign, a warning that we are heading toward danger. But more often than not, it is an invitation. If you feel that tightening in your chest, that sudden rush of adrenaline when you think about a specific path, it is because you are standing at the edge of something that actually matters. Every person who has ever contributed anything of lasting value to this world started exactly where you are, trembling, uncertain, and convinced they weren't enough. The only difference is that they refused to let their fear make their decisions for them. They understood that the risk of being seen, even in all their imperfection, was infinitely smaller than the risk of spending a lifetime in hiding. So, I want you to look at your own life right now, with the same brutal honesty the merchant offered Anna. What is that one thing you've been smashing down? What is the bird you've been keeping in the back room because you're afraid the world won't understand its song? Maybe it's a career change, a difficult conversation, or a creative pursuit that feels too big for someone like you. Whatever it is, you already know. You feel it vibrating in your soul right now. My challenge to you is simple. Do not wait until you are ready, because readiness is a myth designed to keep you safe. Tomorrow morning, take one small, terrifying step toward that truth. Put your work in the window. Send the message. Show your heart. Because the moment you choose to act while your hands are shaking, you don't just change your own life. You give the rest of us permission to be brave, too. This is how we move forward, not by losing our fear, but by walking right through the center of it. In the end, Anna's story is not about pottery. It is a profound exploration of the human soul and our collective tendency to choose a comfortable cage over a challenging sky. We often convince ourselves that by staying quiet and safe, we are being wise stewards of our lives. But the truth is far more sobering. Every day we spend suppressing our true potential. We are paying a tax on our own existence, a tax paid in regret, in hollow success, and in the slow erosion of our joy. The merchant's wisdom reminds us that the world doesn't need more people who are fine. It needs people who are brave enough to be seen. True power is not the absence of anxiety. It is the realization that your purpose is larger than your discomfort. When you finally stop smashing your masterpieces in the dark and start placing them in the window of your life, you reclaim the parts of yourself you thought were lost forever. You discover that you were never actually afraid of failing. You were afraid of finally realizing how powerful you truly are. The core lesson here is that fear is a compass, not a barrier. If you feel a deep, trembling resistance toward a specific goal, it is because that goal is intimately tied to your growth. To apply this today, identify one secret masterpiece you've been hiding, a project, a conversation, or a dream, and commit to making it visible in one small way. Don't wait for the fear to leave. It won't. Instead, learn to act while your hands are shaking. That shaking is simply the sound of your old, limited self making room for the person you are becoming. I want to hear from you. What is one small thing you have been putting off because of fear that you are willing to try today? Please share your thoughts in the comments so we can support and learn from each other's journeys. And if this message spoke to you, please subscribe to Water Concept Mindset. Your support helps us continue to create content that challenges the spirit and fuels the climb.